When I was a kid, I once saw a movie Judge Dredd, and not the good one with Karl Urban, but the one that's generally considered to be a failure, the Stallone Dredd. I wasn't aware of its reputation at the time and totally enjoyed the action, but there was one thing that I felt was very wrong even back then: the clones. Aside from looking utterly terrifying, clones in this movie were also somehow expected to inherit some personality traits and moral compass of their DNA donors, which I found hard to believe. I didn't know much about how DNA works back then, but from just the knowledge of my family tree alone, I could figure that genes cannot be the main thing responsible for personality and behavior. These very often get determined by the environment. It is true, of course, that genes dictate a lot of things that we can't change without surgery, like color of the eyes, hair and skin, shape of skull, type of genitals, as well as genes can complicate life or even bring an untimely death if they happen to fall in a wrong combination. However, in terms of brain development, in humans at least, genes only program the basic neural cell framework, while the contents of this structure are mostly determined by what happens to the body during the life. There are certain tendencies and predispositions that genes can define, but the main bulk of work in shaping our mind and personality generally falls upon the world that surrounds us. The genes themselves, in fact, can change the way how they get expressed depending on the environment. There's a whole branch of science that studies that, called epigenetics. That means, in essence, that if some newborn baby of Stone Age hunter-gatherers somehow time-traveled to our days and got adopted by some scientist or doctor couple, he could have developed into a very successful young man, and vice versa. Because in both cases, in the very beginning, brain of a child is a blank slate that starts shaping itself according to the world that surrounds the body. Human brain is very adaptable, but this process of adaptation takes a decent amount of time. While a brain self-adjusts and learns, the body has to be taken care of and supported by parents, or at the very least some other caring humans. There are known cases of babies being neglected in crucial stages of their development, as well as spending those stages with animals. And in such undeniably tragic cases, they could never adapt to human society again. Most never even spoke. That sensitive period is quite long. If we compare parental care of different mammals, we kinda beat almost everyone in duration. And that's one of the key factors that makes us the smartest animals. More ancient and primitive animals, like reptiles, amphibians or fishes, have a lot of genetically determined inbuilt knowledge and often have little to non-parental care at all. What would that mean for clones with inbuilt moral compass? Well, it is just not plausible. In fact, you can't build in any mind presets unless you physically change the principle of how the brains work, which would be something different from cloning. So, theoretically, if you somehow manage to clone one-piece adult human being who have not had ever been exposed to the real world, it must come out of the vat brain dead or something. I said if, because real-life cloning does not really include an option of producing a mature adult organism. Cloning is a process of making an identical copy of an individual, not speeding up its development. Cloning itself is actually absolutely doable, and while it has its issues, the technologies will only improve as time moves on. The core idea behind cloning is the following. There are two types of cells: sex cells with one set of chromosomes and somatic cells with two. To do cloning, we should extract a nucleus of a somatic cell of some adult organism, insert it into an egg cell of the same species, and then implant it into a womb if necessary. Egg cells are larger than all other cells in our organism. They are kinda loaded with a soup of nutrients and spare parts to build a new organism from. If you replace its nucleus with one that has double set of chromosomes, you can trick it to believe that it is fertilized and grow a copy of an organism that the somatic cell nucleus was taken from. It will follow the same route as original though, and will have to be played with, fed, cleaned, educated, entertained, and so on, until he finally grows into an adult. Growth of the organism is mostly regulated by hormones, but tinkering with them is really dangerous. One problem is that different organs and organ systems develop at different rates, as well as some just need time. Like bone growth occurs in many layers and through cartilages. Oh yeah, also bones and muscles won't develop properly if you don't use them, so you kinda can't skip that time of playing and running around as a kid. There are different ways to do cloning, actually. You can also take one of more or less specialized organism cells and force it to revert to its ancestral, pluripotent state, from which it can develop into any other type of cells. That technique is generally slower and less productive than egg cell cloning, but they are both still under development and have not yet reached their full potential. So it's hard to say what will be an optimal cloning technique in 2 decades or more. However, regardless of how far these technologies go, they cannot accelerate aging, not without producing a very unhealthy organism. Aging must be regulated by delicate and intricately interconnected shifts of different hormones that are genetically pre-programmed to occur in certain sequences at certain times. You can't just speed it all up, unless you have god-level genetic engineering tech to entirely readjust it. Speaking of aging and genetics, it's worth to mention telomeres. These are like little bumpers at the ends of chromosomes, which lose some tiny part every time when the chromosome gets copied for cell division. Because of that, telomeres get shorter over time, and after they are gone entirely, the chromosome copying system starts breaking down important genes, which is one of the reasons why we age. If you use a nucleus of your cell in 30s, say during some midlife crisis or something, to produce a clone of yourself, in 20 years that clone will feel not like a young adult, but like a 50-year-old. That is probably one of the factors that caused the untimely death of Dolly the sheep, the first cloned mammal. Dolly only lived for 6 years, while average sheep reach at least 12. But Dolly's mother was 6 herself at the moment of cloning, and thus gave rise to a clone with shortened telomeres. It might not have been the only reason, since Dolly died of lung disease that also killed several other, non-cloned sheep that lived at the same place. Telomere burnout, however, is a very real and serious issue that should be definitely taken into account if you do cloning. That issue can probably be fixed with genetic engineering, but once we start doing that, we will be moving further and further away from the concept of the clones. A lot of things can be fixed with genetic engineering, but that is its own can of worms, which I will not open in this video and would rather save for some separate deep dive sometime in the future. Even without the added ethical problems of genetic engineering, cloning has an impressive amount of problems on its own. A lot of them stem from religions, which mostly agree that the monopoly to manipulate human lives belongs to God. Aside from that, cloning has much more realistic ethical issues, and one of the worst is the current state of the art. The most effective tech that we have, transplanting somatic nucleus into egg cell, is very far from effective for now. To produce animal clones, like Dolly and macaque clones, which are probably our closest relatives cloned so far, scientists had to transform hundreds of egg cells, losing dozens of them in various stages of development, both before and after birth, until out of the hundreds they got one Dolly and a bunch of short-lived poor macaque babies. Reproductive human cloning, given our technologies, would thus be as cruel as using humans as crash test dolls, and cannot be permitted in any civilized society. Technology can change with time, but it's hard to say how much time exactly will it take. And for now, reproductive cloning is either unlegislated or illegal worldwide. In fact, it might be one of the most universally prohibited things. Tissue and organ cloning, however, is at least partially legal in some places. By exposing cloned cells to special conditions, you can make them turn not into an embryo, but just some organ or part of that organ. You can make transplants out of other people's body parts, of course, if they consent to donate. But that will always lead to at least some degree of immune rejection, while cloned tissues can be integrated into organism perfectly. While tissue printing is not science fiction but a diamond-tier fact that is already happening in some countries, printing the whole organism would be a task on the whole other level. The problem is that organism is not expected to be half-complete. It needs itself as a whole at every moment of its existence to function properly. There's a joke about a car technician who fixes some surgeon's car and complains how he, in the very same way as a surgeon, also screws with different tubes and valves, but somehow earns 10 times less. On that, surgeon says, "Well, buddy, I'll pay you 10 times more. That is, if you fix it while the engine is running." That is very true for human body. It is very vulnerable if open. Some cells can only last for minutes without fresh oxygen and glucose, and real-life bioprinting is a very slow process. It is not enough to just place the cells where they need to be. They also have to establish interconnection to make an organ, which takes time. We are now generally limited to printing tissue, which already gets used in some countries for therapeutic purposes, and I guess we can progress to clone printing the whole organs. But printing a whole human would be just against human nature. There are certain things that only more ancient and primitive animals could pull out. Anyway, even if some future civilization or advanced aliens somehow manage to bioprint body cell by cell, the whole next other level would be printing in the brain. The problem with the brain is that it is a dynamic, ever-changing structure and a very delicate one. Given even the best of our current tech, we can't even scan the whole brain right now, in the detail that would allow us to see up to the cell interconnection level. This can be solved, to some degree, via histological preparation of brain, cutting it in small slices and then recording them layer by layer with maximum magnification. But we are speaking about death here. You can't do that to a brain of a living human. Radiology, even if it was ever to achieve such depth of definition, whether it would be X-ray, magnetic resonance, ultrasounds, or any other imaginable approach, it would also have to be immensely destructive and not survivable as well. Then you would of course face serious problems at printing stage. Neural cells build connections based on the interactions of the organism with the outer world, and they form a very complex, intertwined, branched structure. For printing, say, a liver, you need just basic liver cells, blood vessels, and bile ducts, and if you stack them together, you will generally get liver tissue. For brain, you would have to micromanage every single cell into a complex macrame with some axons stretching throughout the whole organism and getting interconnected, intertwined, and branching multiple times. Such a degree of complexity can only be achieved with nanotech, but I'm not really sure that even that will help. So, to sum it up, printing brains with pre-recorded memory and personality is on the weaker side of sci-fi, and it should inevitably kill the cloning donor during brain scan. Now that we've established some cloning nuances and limits, here's the fun part. Let's see how different movie clones stand against science. Before we proceed any further, however, I must warn you that quite a lot of clone movies contain some unexpected plot twist, which I will not hesitate to reveal if it's necessary for the estimation of scientific plausibility. So if you haven't seen some of these movies, beware, they're gonna be spoilers. The first on our list will be the Stallone Judge Dredd that I mentioned, and it fails pathetically. Not only do adult humans grow in 8 hours here, but they also inherit the general mindset of peoples they were cloned from. That is not the worst we'll see here though. At the very least, Judge Dredd clones don't have personalities inbuilt, so I'll rate them as Vox tier, science fantasy. Maybe Schwarzenegger can outdo Stallone. He also had a clone movie, The Sixth Day, where some evil corporation illegally clones peoples, Schwarzenegger himself included. Well, sadly, in Sixth Day, cloning of adult individuals apparently happens in just 2 hours and features a full memory transfer, which gets achieved via some mysterious process called syncording. It is expected to be able to scan the whole brain without destroying it in mere seconds, and somehow it does it through the eyes. Sorry, Arnie, but that is by all means the very cake tier of clone movies. Now try to guess which movie it is. A man gets cloned in some deep space future, only to serve as an expendable unit for tasks that no regular peoples can or want to perform. A man struggling desperately against his own nature and the cold, desolate world around him, desperate to somehow survive at least a little bit more. I am speaking, of course, about the movie Moon, released in 2009 and starring mostly Sam Rockwell, who plays a character named Sam Bell in his many iterations. In Moon, peoples in not-so-remote future finally cracked how to make nuclear fusion effective, and now need fuel to keep it running. Fuel, helium-3, got deposited on the surface of the Moon in many layers during the countless millennia of solar wind. In the absence of tectonics and climate, it is not very hard to harvest. Just scoop it off the surface. Most of the operations are automatized and require just a single human to look after it all. Some space tech guy on a long working trip. Some Sam who will go home when his 3-year contract will be over. Or will he? It turns out that Sam is as much the part of the machine as the rest of the station. He's just a disposable organic piece that needs to be replaced every couple of years. It seems like the telomere effect got used to its fullest here. At some point, clone body just starts falling apart. However, that's probably where the scientific strengths of the Moon tragically end. We don't really get much details of cloning process in this movie, but from what we see alone, it appears that local clones are grown straight to the adult form, and while it doesn't happen as laughably fast as in Judge Dredd or Sixth Day, it happens with full memory and personality transfer, which, as we've established, is very unlikely and should definitely kill the donor. But we get to learn that the original Sam Bell is apparently still alive. So, all in all, it pains me to say that, but even despite the helium mining part being super hard science fiction, the clone thing in Moon turns out to be cake tier. A very similar thing once happened in movie Oblivion with Tom Cruise. He also got himself to patrol a desolate piece of land and fix broken robots. Unlike in Sam's Singularity, however, Tom Cruise clones got to hang out with a company of some ladies, Morgan Freeman and Jamie Lannister with a beard. Tom Cruise's case is also the one of full adult clones with full personality transfer, but this time it is done by aliens, not some next-century human tech. I would not exclude that highly adaptable, intelligent, spacefaring alien species could learn to use hostile biological species that it encounters against themselves. It seems that the original does not exist anymore, which means he probably didn't survive scanning, which is exactly what we expect from such a tech. The whole approach of Tom cruising the entire planet seems quite risky, and entirely reliant on surviving humans never taking off their masks. Then it is weird that drones produced by such an advanced alien AI don't have some self-repair mechanism or at least auxiliary repair drones. But in general, if we concentrate on cloning itself, I unexpectedly have to admit that it is surprisingly hard sci-fi, up to tungsten tier. But with a side note that we are probably dealing with some sort of very highly advanced 3D bioprinting tech. Duplication, not true cloning. Speaking of duplication, another movie worth mentioning is Prestige. It's got some steampunk duplicates of Hugh Jackman, blind old man, cat, and a bunch of heads, spawned with some electrical-looking machine that got constructed by Nikola Tesla. Tesla was of course a very curious and eccentric man, but even if he tried his best, I very much doubt that such a machine is possible at all. It is capable to produce identical copies of both living organisms and non-living objects, phenomenon unheard of even in the bizarre world of modern physics. Well, if we get creative with physics, prestige duplication can be possibly explained through wormholes, quantum effects, or string theory, but that all would be unnecessarily complicated, very far-fetched, and none of such technologies could have been available to Tesla anyway. So, another one of my favorite movies goes to cake tier. Let's try something that's surely hard sci-fi maybe. Never Let Me Go, a British sci-fi drama about clones getting grown for organs. They are apparently genetically identical to the humans they will donate their organs to, but they have their own personalities, which gradually develop as they grow and mature. No growth acceleration, they age just like normal humans. So far so good? Yes, actually, and ethical questions aside, it almost sounds like diamond tier. One thing, however, is very wrong. Events of the movie take place in 70s to 90s, while the first animal cloned, Dolly the sheep, only appeared in 1996. There is just no way cloning could have been successfully done on such a scale in 70s, with none of the children suffering from adverse effects. Besides, in 70s, there would be just no other way to do it except for the surrogate mothers, which we are never shown, and everyone acts as if they don't exist. I refuse to believe that none of them ever tried to get her child back or do something about the situation. The most horrifying, though, is unwillingness of the clones themselves to do something about the situation. They were isolated from society for most of their lives and are thus socially impaired to some degree. I get that. That is understandable. But none of them ever attempt to run, and it's not like they are kept in cages. Apparently, clones can totally drive a car. Regardless of that, they live in complete compliance with their sad fates, and the best they can think of to stop their unfair, untimely death is to ask some madam to postpone it a little bit because they are in love. More than that, the entire society seems to be okay with the fact that clones don't have human rights. Not a single activist, not a single compassionate human being who would agree to smuggle a couple of clones in love on a boat to Ireland or something? So, yeah, if we drop it one tier down for each of these nitpicks, Never Let Me Go only ends up in iron and glass tier of average sci-fi. Maximum score for cloning itself, and very dystopian fantasy approach to everything else. A very similar thing, clones grown for organs, actually happened a couple of years before that, in Michael Bay movie Island. Local clones are grown straight to adulthood, which should drop scientific plausibility, but very much as expected from adult-grown clones, they kinda come out of the vats brain dead. They need extensive programming, and even after that, at first, they are far from bright. They each develop into their own personality, distinct from the original, and unlike the British organ clones, American ones refuse to sacrifice themselves peacefully. They wanna live. There is also no problem with the society, since according to the plot, society is absolutely not aware that clones have consciousness, and clones are unaware that some outside society even exists. They are grown in very informationally sterile conditions, happily waiting for their lucky chance to go to some island vacation and never come back. One thing where Michael Bay missteps are memories of the original, which clone suddenly recalls. That was unscientific and unnecessary, as well as the technologies that would be required for successful mass cloning of adult human organisms are not gonna appear in at least decades to come, while Island is set in 2019. But even with these nitpicks to timing, memory transfer, and general growth acceleration, I would rate Island as quartz tier, firm sci-fi. Who would have thought that Michael Bay, of all peoples, will bring us one of the most realistic sci-fi clones? But the next one might sound even more surprising. I mean, of course, no serious discussion of sci-fi movie clones might occur without mentioning George Lucas and Star Wars in general, and Episode 2, Attack of the Clones in particular. Clones appeared both before and after that movie, but in Attack of the Clones we get their origin story and learn the most about them. Star Wars is notorious for being on the soft side of sci-fi, but if we give them a chance, local clones actually do surprisingly good in science. They apparently get grown in artificial wombs, a technology that we don't yet have, but there is absolutely nothing impossible about it. And I suppose advanced alien civilization might have actually handled it. Star Wars clones have one predecessor but different personalities, and can be trained into more or less effective soldiers, despite their predecessor being solitary bounty hunter. They are exactly cloned, not copied, so the destruction of the original is not necessary. They are produced with the additional use of genetic engineering, which has built-in growth acceleration. They reach maturity in half the time that humans do, which is actually more or less believable if you manage the genetic and hormonal part properly and precisely. All in all, even despite my couple of nitpicks, I'd rate Clones from the Galaxy Far Far Away as the hardest on this list. Robbie tier serious sci-fi. I could have maybe raised both Star Wars and Oblivion one tier up, but I don't like relying too much on mysterious powers of aliens. If there's one species that knows about humans the most, it's us, humans. We might have not yet figured how to connect quark world and gravity, but we know biochemistry, genetics, and anatomy of humans better than anyone else. So, I would say if some advanced alien civilization decided to clone some humans, it would be first of all most likely interested not in getting themselves some fine specimen of Django Fett or Tom Cruise, but in raiding a library of some medical university or something. Now the last, but certainly not the least, the one that most probably really waited for, the new clone movie Mickey 17 with Robert Pattinson. How does he do on such a landscape, eh? Well, to be honest, it doesn't look good at all, that is, in terms of scientific plausibility. In terms of the movie itself, it is absolutely awesome. I saw it with my girlfriend and we both enjoyed it. It's deeper than any other clone movie on this list. Besides cloning, it covers a wide array of other themes, such as friendship, love, guilt, violence, death, sacrifice, betrayal, drugs, sapient alien civilizations, politics. Oh yeah, speaking of politics, Mickey 17 actually makes a surprisingly hard sci-fi via predicting the appearance of a certain type of leader. But well, if we get to the plausibility of Pattinson clones, Their closest evolutionary relatives would be the clones of Schwarzenegger, Sam Rockwell, and Tom Cruise. It is a full adult clone with a full memory transfer and with a regular brain scanning. Mickey's brain scanning tech looks ridiculous. There is absolutely no reason for any fluids to be there. Mickey's brain's portable hard drive, however, looks absolutely hardcore, and I have no objections against it. The main problem, again, is that brain scanning is non-destructive. Apparently, it's just a simple weekly procedure here, while in reality, poor Mickey would have to be reassembled de novo after each update of his hardcore hard drive. The main reason why Tom Cruise clones got the tungsten tier of hard sci-fi is because they are actually not clones, but duplicates produced by highly advanced aliens which might have tech for that. In Mickey, it is done by humans in as early as 2054, which doesn't sound very plausible already, but it is neither duplicating nor true cloning. It's bioprinting, and it looks very recognizable. The device is shaped like some computer tomography or magnetic resonance scanner, and it acts like a paper printer. The light, the sounds, the paper chewing and spitting effects. Actually, I must admit that bioprinting possibly deserves a video on its own, much like genetic engineering. But in short, for now, as I have already said, bioprinting adult human organism is kinda almost impossible. So, all in all, it looks like Mickey belongs in cake tier. But I will do something controversial here. I have set a precedent with Never Let Me Go, which was near perfect in terms of biology, but lost a bunch of points due to failing in psychology, sociology, politics, and many other softer sciences. Mickey kinda does the opposite. While the cloning process here is hardly believable, the politics and social reaction around it are very realistic. Very much like it would happen with such precise human copies in real life, it raises a lot of questions about the laws, politics, and ethics. And the movie does exactly what we humans have done so far: prohibits cloning. It's only allowed to exist in space, far from the normal society conditions, where such an approach might be somewhat justified. That I find very believable. Oh, there is also one very dumb thing. There are peoples who have known Mickey for years and are probably aware that he backups his mind brick weekly, but they still keep asking him, "How does it feel to die, Mickey?" Come on, seriously, peoples, Mickey cannot possibly remember any of his deaths. How the hell should he know? But other than that, I guess Mickey 17 has enough strengths in exploring social consequences of clones to cover for its weaknesses in biology. So I would give it rubber tier, weak sci-fi. So here you have it, the ultimate scientific plausibility tier list of clone movies. If you think I'm terribly wrong somewhere, please write about it in the comments. I might make another clone video sometime in the future. There is still a bunch of unrated clone movies left. Or I might make a video on a topic that you pick. Check out a poll in my channel's community tab. Other than that, if you liked the video, leave a like, and if you'd like to see more like it, subscribe. That is scientifically proven to work. Thank you for attention, stay hardcore, and see you in the next video.